you're new, my name is Landry, and I started a new series on my channel where I talk all things Best Medicine. If you're not sure what Best Medicine is, it is an American adaptation / spinoff of a beloved British TV series called Doc Martin, which was on the air for 18 years, but sadly came to an end in 2022. I did not come across Doc Martin until 2024, but immediately became a huge fan after watching several episodes and becoming addicted. I have since watched the show through all the way 3 times and counting. So when I found out there was going to be an American adaptation called Best Medicine on Fox, I decided that I wanted to make a little series on my channel where each and every week we dig into the episodes. I share my perspectives and even bring in a little bit of Doc Martin knowledge for those that also watch Doc Martin as well. But yeah, if you've not seen Best Medicine before, I do not recommend watching these videos until after watching because there will be spoilers. I dig really deep into these episodes and probably share a little bit too much, but you know. We have seen 11 episodes so far, 12 counting this week's. But if you have not caught up on my reaction videos, I have a playlist on my channel that has episodes 1 through 11 and a bonus episode when we did not get an episode on the air a couple of weeks ago. I shared my predictions and thoughts. But yeah, if you have stayed on top of Best Medicine like myself and you're curious what my thoughts are, come on, let's talk about it. So, can you believe we're on the second to last episode? Next week is the finale. And I feel like it's just flown by so fast. I mean, I'm a little sad about it. When we first started watching, I was very excited. I loved the show. And I could not wait for Tuesdays to come because I wanted to see more and more and more. And I love making these videos. But as the seasons progressed, it's gotten faster and faster and faster, it seems like, and we're already to the last episode next week, and I'm sad. Now, it does make me feel a little bit better knowing that there's going to be a season 2, because we got that confirmed a couple of weeks ago, and we've been told that there'll be 12 episodes for season 2. I don't know if they'll add more, but right now I read that there's going to be definitely 12 episodes, so we're still going to get to see the beloved Port Wynn townspeople that we've grown to love. We're going to still get to see Dr. Best. Hopefully get to see a little bit more of him and Louisa's relationship grow. I hope. We'll dig into that later. But yeah, before we get into talking about episode 12, let's dig into last week's episode. Last week's episode was one of my favorites, comedy-wise, and a little bit of drama. It was a dramedy for sure, but I feel like the comedy was there. I was laughing more, found things more funnier. Don't get me wrong, I laughed at other episodes, but this one was just my favorite, I think, because they prioritized filming in only 2 locations. It was what they called a bottle episode. And we got to see character developments grow more and get to learn more about some of the characters, which was nice. We got to see the whole situation of how Louisa and Martin took the kiss from the previous episode. Both were getting questioned by the small town, of course. What do you expect? It's Port Wynn. Nothing can be kept a secret. And I did not see it, but we saw at the end of the episode that Louisa is wanting to have a baby, and Martin had brought out a piece of paper basically wanting to share his emotions and feelings towards her. And she kind of shuts him down and tells him that she's basically doesn't think that if they kept a serious relationship, it wouldn't work out, pretty much. That she wants to have a baby and that the town is just too small for the both of them to have a relationship. And, you know, Martin, it kind of hit Martin a little bit. You could tell. And at the end, we also see that Martin ends up befriending Copernicus and finally admitting that he is his dog, and gets him a collar and leash, which was very touching. It's a big step for Martin Best, considering he despised the dog the whole entire season. And of course, a lot more happened. The main plot of the episode was the plague outbreak, the infested fleas, and the town thinking they were going to die. But the main thing that we needed to talk about was the Martin and Louisa relationship. And of course, Sheriff Mark, was hurt by finding out. He witnessed it in the hospital parking lot, was giving Martin a hard time. And it looked like he forgave him and was going to be friends with Martin again. But as we get into this episode, maybe that's not the case. So let's dive into Best Medicine Season 1, Episode 12, A Tale of Two Sister Cities. So right off the bat, we see Bert is hanging a Norwegian flag on Dr. Best's Martin's doorstep, and immediately Martin comes out and he's like, I did not request this, what on earth are you doing? You don't have my permission, pretty much, is what he was saying. And Bert's like, haven't you heard the Norwegians are coming to town, and everyone's getting a flag on their doorstep. And my favorite thing that Bert said, because we're getting to learn, we know by now that Bert is the type of person, if he can make a little extra cash, he's going to, because of the whole past things that's happened when he became the blueberry judge. He was taking advantage of his role, getting free things. When the Fogman incident happened, him and Greg were making money by giving tours, letting people take private pictures, handing out t-shirts. So Bert's the kind of guy, if he can figure out something to make a little extra cash, he's going to. So right now he's hanging flags. And he says to Martin, don't worry, it's on the house. Get it? Because it's on the house. And Martin didn't find his humor funny. And he's like, but you will be getting charged for it. Shocker, shocker. So, while that's going on, we also see that Peter Kronk is walking Copernicus the dog, and it was nice to see, after what happened last week, Martin befriending the dog, taking ownership. And in the waiting room, Elaine and everybody, all the patients, are excited about the Norwegians coming, and Martin still doesn't understand. And Elaine's doing accents in the waiting room, which I thought was pretty funny. I think she did a pretty good job, in my opinion. And, she's super excited because, in last week's episode, we saw that Al helped her do her audition tape because she wants to go to Juilliard acting school, drama school. And she was like, I'm practicing my accents because you never know, I might get into Juilliard, or I hope I get into Juilliard. And, that Mr. Collins guy, the one that, his name's Jed, we finally found out his name. He's the one that Greg and George sent to sell Sarah's house, show her house, and Sarah, bribed him into telling them that it was infested with fleas and the plague. So, he was in there, and he encourages Elaine, so what other accents can you do? And immediately Martin's like, please don't encourage her. And so she does an Italian accent, and everybody's like excited, and he's like, really? She's just adding an A to the end of words. He was not impressed, and she did an Australian accent, and she did a British accent. I thought it was funny. And I'm starting to love Elaine's character as we're getting to know her more. And then he looks at her because he's not impressed, and he says, how about performing your role as administrative assistant? He's like, I'm not impressed with your shenanigans, your little accents, let's get to work, how Martin is by now. So, it's nice to see another side of Elaine where she is not doing the social media stuff. She's actually, showing her personality more, and I'm liking her more and more. Meanwhile, Peter Kronk's in Dr. Best's kitchen, getting Copernicus some water, and he's trying his best. He's like, I filled Copernicus's bowl up with water because it's very important that dogs get hydrated once they go for a walk. And he ended up using Martin's cereal bowl, and Martin was like, that's not his bowl, that's my cereal bowl. And Peter's like, I'm sorry. Like, he immediately realizes that maybe he did the wrong thing, but Dr. Best didn't shout at him. He was like, he let him go off with he was like, it's okay. And the real reason Peter wanted to talk to Dr. Best is he wants him to come to the school because he's doing a presentation for the Norwegians, and we learned that his mom is working. Which, have you noticed that since the first 2 episodes, we never see Peter Kronk's mom? It's always because she's always working, which we learn why now, because we find out that his father's in New Hampshire, so he has a single parent with him. But that's not the point. What I'm trying to say is, like, have you noticed that we never really see the parents? And that goes for every kid that's in the town. We never really see their parents much, I've noticed. And I just think it's super sweet that Louisa is always there for Peter Kronk and always like helping him and taking him to things like the bird watching event, whether they wanted him to go or not, and just all the different things. I just noticed that. And I guess it's common in a small town that the community helps out, I guess. But I just wanted to throw that out there. So he asks Dr. Best, Martin, if he'll come to his speech. And, Martin's like, well, it's this afternoon. Well, I'm busy. It's just not going to work. And you can immediately tell that Peter is disappointed. And he immediately gets interrupted because Elaine comes in and tells him that there's been an emergency at the town hall and that it's urgent, that Louisa called. And immediately you see that Martin changes his tune, because immediately, if it's an emergency, he usually jumps to it. But the second she said Louisa called and he says, Louisa, is everything okay? He immediately stops everything and he goes. So he still has feelings for her. He didn't mean what he said when he said they can just pretend the kiss never happened 2 episodes ago. And you can tell he was hurt last week's episode when she kind of shut him down, saying it's time for them to move on. So, just saying, he still has feelings for her. So, he gets to the town hall and he says, emergency, what's going on? And Louisa's like, oh, it's not a medical emergency, it's a town council emergency. And, immediately he's kind of annoyed because he was brought there on false information, pretty much. And it turns out that they have been trying to get a sister city for a while, and they're talking about how it never worked out, and that the death of Agnes Kloof has caused tension where they don't want to talk about it anymore. And that when they said, we don't want to talk about it anymore, and he says, so why are we talking about it? That's what Martin says. And so basically Agnes Kloof was on the council, and she died, unfortunately, when she fell off the cliff. And so it's just them and Glendon ruled against the decision to have a sister city. But the other 3, Geneva, Louisa, and I can't think of the other guy's name right off the top of my head, they ruled against Glendon into appointing Martin as the person to take Agnes Kloof's place. And, immediately Martin is like, no, not doing it, no. And they're like, well, it's only temporary. And he's like, why did you choose me? And it was so funny. They were beating around the bush. Geneva's like, well, you're exceptional. You're brilliant. The person we need. And Louisa, and we knew you'd be in a suit. When she said, and we knew you'd be in a suit. I just thought that was so funny. So, looks like Martin is going to be part of the council, whether he likes it or not. And we cut to them wearing the sashes, and Martin looks like he's having a grand old time. He's not. And so we meet the Norwegians, and they seem like nice people, I would say. And they introduce themselves, and we see them signing the contract, and Geneva signs for on behalf of Portland that they become the sister cities. And meanwhile, Sheriff Mark doesn't look like he's his normal self. He's dozing off while they're talking, introducing themselves. And when he's asked to take a picture, he didn't really hear what was happening. And when he goes to take the picture, he doesn't really take many pictures. He takes one and he's done. And so there's something going on with Mark. And you see that as the Norwegians are introducing themselves, Martin is just not impressed at all. In fact, he says, you here, because she says, there's 3 of us, meaning she was pregnant, and then, Louisa kind of shoulders him, and he's like, no, I mean, isn't it not safe to travel? That is not what he meant. He meant, why are y'all here? He's not thrilled that they are there. And, they're like, no, this is our 4th child, and it's it's safe. So Martin is not impressed with these Norwegian folks, and he is not thrilled that they are there. Glyndon's not thrilled that he is part of the temporary council. And Louise is like, why are you so negative all the time? Can't you see the good in people? Don't you want to change? Martin's like, I am who I am. So he doesn't see anything wrong with not trusting people, pretty much. And meanwhile, Louise is talking to Sheriff Mark at the food table. And Mark just is constantly eating. He's talking with his mouth full. You can't understand really what he's saying. Even Louise is like, why don't you swallow before you continue? And he just talked about how he's been eating a lot lately. And then he gets dizzy and falls straight into the table. And Dr. Bess Martin is concerned. He asks him if he's okay. And immediately Mark goes into defense mode, tells him that he's not his friend and that he is not his councilman. So he's still very upset with Martin and Louisa for the kiss. He feels betrayed. I thought that was behind him in last week's episode because he tells Martin that they're friends again. Because he asks Martin, are we friends? And Martin says, yes, we are friends. Which was a huge step for Martin. So I thought it was all behind them, but no, Mark still has feelings. He still has feelings for Louisa, and he's upset that his friend betrayed him. So, immediately we see that there is something clearly going on with Sheriff Mark, and Dr. Bess Martin tries to help him, but he doesn't want help. So, we also see George at the bay area, I guess you would call it, at the dock area, getting lobsters from Aunt Sarah for the big night, and that was just nice to see. I love Aunt Sarah, and I love George, and their little conversation they were having between each other. Aunt Sarah, George is like, are you excited? Are you coming to the big dance dinner thing tonight? And Aunt Sarah's like, I wouldn't miss it. And George is like telling about the Norwegians, the couple that's staying. They're staying at the Salty Breeze, how they're gorgeous, and they're just excited to have visitors in town, pretty much. And I loved what Aunt Sarah said. She said, these lobsters are so fresh that their families don't know they are missing yet. And, George is like, that's so dark, but so funny. And it was funny at the end because when she says that and George leaves, she gets hit in the back of the head with a drone. So the comedy part, the writing and comedy part of that was just so funny. That she says that and then she immediately gets hit in the back of the head with a drone. And Aunt Sarah being Aunt Sarah, she's like, who hit me with this? This is not okay. And clearly nobody confessed up to it, and we never saw who did it. So poor Aunt Sarah got nailed in the back of the head with a drone. So meanwhile, back at Dr. Best's office, we see for the first time Greg coming into the doctor's office, and he looks very concerned. And first thing he says is, Martin, can we talk? I need to talk to you in private. And Martin's like, well, typically that's what happens in a doctor's office. And he's like, well, I haven't been able to go to the bathroom in several days. And Martin's like, well, that's totally understandable. You're just constipated. And he's like, no, I'm scared to go to the bathroom. I know what's causing it. I'm pooping little men. And the look on Martin's face, because he's like, you can tell me anything. I've heard it all. And he immediately gets concerned, and he's like, Greg, so are you taking any medication that would make you hallucinate thinking this? And he's like, no. He's like, I know it's true. And then Martin's like, well, you could be having a dream. It's totally normal. And Greg is convinced that that is not the case, that he is really pooping little men. And it was just that whole interaction, Martin. So, I'm sorry, did I get this right? You pooped on a little man? And he's like, no, I physically pooped out a little man. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? I was just laughing because I was like, what? And this coming from Greg was just even funnier because it's Greg. That's what I love about Greg's personality. So Martin's like, well, I'm going to give you some laxatives for the constipation, and that should help you go. And as for the little man, he asks him if it talks back to him, and he says, of course not, it's not real. It's not real, it's not coming to life. And, it's a little bit of relief that he isn't hallucinating too much, if he is hallucinating, because he knows good enough that it can't talk back to him. So that's a good sign. And Martin's like, well, this should help with the constipation, and as for the little men, I'm sure they're part of your imagination. You're just sleep deprived, or you're just hallucinating in your sleep. So, that was the whole thing. So back at the doctor's office, after Greg leaves, we see Dr. Best sitting at his desk on his laptop reading the newspaper, and you see Peter Crunk's on the head of it where it says Portland School welcomes Norwegians to town. And immediately you see that he really feels bad that he told Peter no, and he goes to Peter's speech at the school. So we have there's a little girl singing the national anthem. It's a whole little thing. And then next thing you know, it's time for Peter to do his part of the presentation. And he's immediately being bullied by this other kid. And it's only that one kid that's bullying him, just heckling him, saying inappropriate things. And what gets me, okay, his parents, everyone's parents are at this event. The kid that's being mean to Peter's mom is sitting, or I'm assuming it's his mom. Regardless, that adult is there for that kid. And is sitting there letting this kid say these mean things to Peter. Like, what? The only person that said to quit was Louisa. So that made me a little bit upset. So Peter goes to talk, and he's getting heckled and bullied, and even Martin's shaking his head. And it was very sweet. Peter had carved out a Viking ship out of Pine Main's state tree. I can't remember right off the top of my head what type it was. And it was a symbol that they are friends across the water, and that they it was just a ticket of their appreciation to the Norwegians, and told them to take it to remember them. And it was just super sweet. And Peter is so smart. Like, he is an intelligent little boy. So I thought that was so sweet that Martin ended up going to his speech, since his presentation, since his parents couldn't be there. And then we see that they are very touched by the whole thing, and they're talking to Louisa about how they can't believe the school is closing, that it's just a beautiful school, and that how sad for the students and everyone being infected. And Louisa's like, don't get emotional, you're gonna get me emotional. And then Louisa goes to talk to Martin, and Martin's like, how can they be so happy and so friendly? They've only been here for 3 hours. And Louisa once again is like, what is wrong with you? Why are you always negative? Can't you see the positive side of things and of people? Not everybody is bad people. And he's just like, no, that's just who I am. This is just who I am. I just can't do that. And she's like, well, maybe you need to change. Everybody is wanting him to change his personality. And immediately we see that right after he says that, Peter comes running to him and hugs him. And the bully kid says, is that your dad? And he says yes. And immediately Louisa and Martin both look at each other like, wait a second, whoa, what is going on here? So I just think it's so cute that Peter finds Martin, Dr. Best, as a father figure. It's just, from the beginning, whenever they were bonding, I could tell that Martin would have a positive impact on Peter's life. So as we get back to the doctor's office, Elaine is kind of stitching or checking on Aunt Sarah's head where she got nailed with the drone, and Dr. Best has no idea what's going on. And I think, I'm 90% sure Elaine was doing a British accent. I think it was British. Because she starts talking in her accent, and Aunt Sarah's like, yeah, I didn't understand a word she said. All I know is I got hit in the back of the head with a drone, and it hurts. And Martin picks up the drone and he says, really? The thing shattered to pieces by hitting your head? She's like, oh no. Once it hit me in the head, I started stomping on it a few times. So that was just so funny, the interaction between the two. And Martin's like, well, just keep the ice pack on your head, because she has a giant bump on the back of her head. And immediately Sheriff Mark comes in, and Elaine's like, there's a new sheriff in town. She's still doing her accents. Well, not new. It's Mark coming to take Sarah's statement. And Aunt Sarah's like, well, come through. And I didn't catch this at first because I had to rewatch the episode again so I can make sure I get details. Aunt Sarah says, come through. And Martin says, oh, I'm sorry. Is he the next patient? So it's the little things that are said in this show are just what are so funny. So Mark comes to take Aunt Sarah's statement, and he still does not seem like he is okay. Even Martin's like, so Mark, how are you feeling? And he's like, not good, obviously. Like, he is still mad at Martin. So he goes to take Aunt Sarah's statement, and Aunt Sarah by now is Aunt Sarah. She's like, well, here's my statement. To the person that hit me in the back of the head with the drone, you are going to be lobster bait. So you better come clean, you moron, or something like that. And Martin's just like patting her on the back of the shoulder. And he's like, no. I mean, what time of day did this happen? Did you get a look at the person that did this? And Aunt Sarah's like, oh, at noon. And Mark is like, in the middle of the day, how dare they? And Aunt Sarah's like, and as for if I saw who did it, they would have been here seeking medical attention if I would have got a hold of them. I just thought that was so funny. Aunt Sarah was not holding back whatsoever. I love Aunt Sarah. I love her character. And Mark's like, okay. And as he's like doing gestures and stuff, he almost falls over. Martin's like, are you okay? And Aunt Sarah's like, did you just stumble just because you were gesturing? And he's like, yeah, but I'm fine. That's normal. And Martin's like, well, have you been dizzy anymore lately? And he's like, yeah, that's what happened to me this morning. And Martin's like, well, there's something serious, there's something going on then. I think we need to do some tests. And, Mark is not having it. He says that there is crime in the town that needs to be taken care of, that it's very embarrassing, that he can't keep the town safe with the Norwegians in town because they have the safest country, and that he needs to get to the bottom of this. And as he's even looking at the drone, trying to figure it out, and he's trying to spell the word, and Martin's like, well, the drone, that's only half the word, the other half has been taken off or rubbed off or whatever. And he's like, Mark just gets short with him and says, I'm sorry, Watson, did I need your help? And so you can tell that he just is not happy with Martin. They're still not cool. And so you think that he's not going to get the test because he is adamant about he needs to get to the bottom of the drone case. But quickly that turns around and we see that Martin did convince him to stay because he's given him tests. He asks him questions. He's trying to figure out why he's gaining excessive weight. Turns out that Mark is eating excessively, has an increased appetite. But his blood pressure looks good. Everything seems to be okay. And so it's still a mystery what's going on with Sheriff Mark. But whatever it is, it's not good. So after we see that, we see Louisa comes into Dr. Best's office and has a little something for him to wear to the big event. Geneva wants everyone to wear sweaters, and immediately Martin's like, no, not doing that. And Louisa's like, I'll just tell them that you're busy and can't come to the event. By now Louisa understands how Martin feels about these events and doesn't want to be a part of them, so she wasn't too surprised if he wouldn't go or not, but she thought she would ask. And immediately things turn. Martin has a serious conversation with Louisa, and I'm like, because he says about what happened at the Salty Breeze, and it gets to that moment, and I'm like, okay, good. He's going to share his thoughts, because he just walked away when she gave him the news about wanting to have a baby, and didn't want him in the picture. And he goes, so about what we talked about in the Salty Breeze, and you wanting a baby, I know a specialist that is in Boston. She's the best. I can send you her as a reference. And I was like, no, that is not what I wanted you to say. I wanted you to confess your feelings to her. You still have feelings for her. But he doesn't do it. He says that. And I think even Louisa was thinking, oh, he's going to say something. And then he says that. And she kind of is like, well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And but at the same time, I think she wanted him to really say how he felt about her. And then she's getting ready to leave, and he goes, Louisa, wait. And it got serious again. I was like, okay. He realized he had an opportunity to say it. He didn't say it. He's going to say it this time. He says, Louisa, I have a question. When you were with Mark, did he ever show signs of excessive alcohol use or drug use? And there was a look on Louisa's face, and she was like kind of disappointed that he wasn't going to ask her something else. And she's like, no, he was always a happy person, never depressed. He would never do those kinds of things. And even Martin says at the end, this one hit me. He says, it must have been nice being in a relationship with somebody that is always happy. And she answers, yeah, it was, or it is. And so he still did not talk to her again. I was hoping the little paper would come right back out and he was going to just pour out his heart and soul to her, but he didn't. Come on, Martin. I need you to please tell what your feelings to Louisa. I just need it. That's how I feel about that. That's what I was doing at the TV too. So, as she's getting ready to leave, Greg comes back in, and he's kind of embarrassed. He's like, I'm here to talk to you about the event. The event tonight. And she's like, yes, it's going to be fantastic, isn't it? Little does she know that is not exactly what he's talking about. So he comes in, and he's like, it happened again. The laxatives worked, but it happened again. I pooped out another little man. And Martin's face, he's like, what? What? What are you talking about? And meanwhile, George has caught on that something's going on with Greg because he's after him apparently, and he's like banging on the door saying, Greg, I know you're in there, and I'm just concerned about you because you turned very pale and now you are in the doctor's office. What is going on? So Greg is like, I guess you're gonna have to let him in. So Martin lets him in, and he wants to know what's going on. He thinks something is terrible, like something bad is happening. And Greg is like, I just don't have the words to share. Doc, you're gonna have to tell him. And Martin's like, me? Why do I have to tell him? So George is like, just give it to me straight, Doc. Is everything okay? And Martin's like, well, Greg thinks that he is pooping out little men. And George's face, he's like, what now? That was just so funny, the whole interaction. So George is like wanting Greg to explain, and Martin's kind of like, he's still in disbelief. He doesn't know why he's having this conversation in his office right now. And he's just asking him if he maybe ate something out of the ordinary recently, or what maybe. Did he eat a toy soldier? Did you think that he ate a toy soldier? And he's like, Greg is like, I keep a food journal. I think I would remember if I wrote down toy soldier as one of the things I ate. And so, clearly it wasn't that. And then he looks at George and he's like, I recognize the faces of them. I feel like I know them. And George is like, do they have tuxedos on? And I was like, oh no, what is about to happen? And even Martin's face is like in disbelief. He does not know what's going on. So we head back to the Salty Breeze, and they're looking in the fridge or freezer, and there's a wedding cake in the freezer, and there are part of the wedding cake is missing and the toppers are missing. So it turns out that Greg, in the middle of the night, without knowing, was eating the cake and ate both of the cake toppers off of the cake. So that explains the mystery. And he's horrified. He doesn't know how on earth that would happen. He doesn't remember walking. He doesn't remember eating. He doesn't remember going back to bed. And Martin's like, well, that's totally normal. It's called sleepwalking. It's totally normal. It happens all the time to many people. And he's like, how can I stop? This is just terrible. Greg is just shook and upset and disgusted that he's been doing this. And, Martin suggests, why don't they get a camera so they can see if that's really what's happening at night. And, Greg is like, let's just add to the misery. He's not too thrilled. And he's embarrassed, but George is like, it's okay. George doesn't care. He's just happy that everything is all good. And, he even says the proof is in the pooping instead of the proof is in the pudding. And Martin was like, not impressed. He's like, okay, I'll leave y'all to it. So we're at the big town event now, and everybody's in their little festive sweaters, but Martin, of course, is not. He was not partaking in that. At least he came to the event. And you have Greg and George sharing to Louisa about the whole incident that Greg, the little health scare, and it turns out he's sleep eating. And so it's time to learn the Norwegian dance, which they are calling the reel. The reel is a signature, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is a signature Norwegian dance, and they are going to teach them how to do it today. And she immediately grabs Martin, and she's like, all you gotta do is hop, clap, and do a little skip. And he's like, you've lost me at hopping. He is not thrilled to do this dance. He doesn't even want to. So they're dancing, they're doing it, and he's with Aunt Sarah, and they're having a conversation. He still doesn't know how they can trust these people, that he just does not trust them. They're just way too friendly the way they are. Aunt Sarah's like, so do you want, next time we have visitors, do you want them just to be rude and just kick us in the shin and just not be pleasant? Is that what you're wanting, Martin? And that's not exactly what he means. He just doesn't trust these people. And even back at the Salty Breeze, even Greg and George, because he was talking about how he cannot stand those people, he thinks that they're just a little too nice. They're asking him why he can't trust people, that all people are bad. And he even makes the comment, well, that's a little hard for me. That's never been my experience. So clearly something happened in Martin's life, that he keeps having things happen to him, and he's just has harder time trusting people because they don't seem like they are who they really are, pretty much. So we're doing the dance, and Aunt Sarah's just scolding him because he is saying those things. And even the Norwegian woman is making small talk with Aunt Sarah. Asked her if she really caught all those lobsters that they ate, and Aunt Sarah's like, oh, it's no big deal. And then as they're walking and doing, you had to pass your partner, and Martin starts talking to Glendon, and Glendon's not happy that he is part of the council and says this is only temporary, that he enjoys it. And Martin's like, I don't enjoy this any more than you do, don't worry. And then we get passed to Louisa, and he still, he immediately changes. Did you notice he immediately changes his tone when he gets to dance with Louisa? He's like more happy again, but he doesn't really get to talk to her, just that he doesn't trust the Norwegians. And then Mark cuts in and starts dancing with Louisa, and then he immediately falls again and crashes. And immediately Martin's like, are you okay? Have you been drinking? And he's like, no, I haven't been drinking. I just had a sip of the drink because it's the culture. And Martin's like, well, I really think that you need to just take a breath and drink some water. You're not okay. And he gets mad and he storms out and says, I'm fine. So Louisa immediately goes after him, and Martin after her. And Sheriff Mark gets in his car and he starts to drive off, and he immediately almost runs over Louisa and Martin, which was not good. So he immediately gets out of the car, he apologizes, he realizes what he almost did, and he takes a breathalyzer test, and it turns out that he is way above the legal limit. He is drunk. And he's in disbelief, he can't believe it, he knows for a fact he hadn't drank that much. And he tells them that he's innocent, then he realizes, wait a second, that's what all the people that I pull over tell. They always say that they're innocent when they're not innocent. And he just ends up handing Martin his badge and the keys and tells him to take him in. So clearly something serious is happening to Mark. So we're at the jail cell, and he gets in the jail, and Martin's saying he thinks this is very unnecessary, that just let him why don't he just let him drive him home? And Mark's like, no, I broke the law and I'm a law abiding, and believe me though, I did not drink. I did not drink. I'm not drunk. You gotta believe me. And Martin's like, I wish I could, but you just proved that you were drunk because of the breathalyzer test. And he's trying to convince Mark to just go home, that everything is, just go home and sleep it off. But he will not, so Mark is going to spend the night in the in the jail, pretty much, in the jail cell. And he even threw the keys, and Martin told him that he can take the keys because he's not going to let himself out. He is not like that. But Martin ends up giving the keys back, tells him to get some sleep, and then there was a moment where I thought Mark was going to apologize to Martin or say something because he tells him to come back, but it turns out he just wanted him to hand him his donuts. So, still, something clearly is going on with Mark. Is he really drunk? I don't know. It seemed like there was more to it, and he's still upset with Martin, of course. So we also go back to the Salty Breeze. Greg and George ended up putting a camera up in the restaurant to see if Greg is indeed sleepwalking, and it turns out he is. He is going out in the middle of the night and just raiding the fridge, eating anything and everything that he can find, and he has no recollection of it. He immediately is horrified, and he's like, what on earth can I do about this? This is not okay. And Dr. Best suggests that he put a lock on his fridge, and just keep an eye on things, that he can eventually get over the sleep eating. And as they're talking about that, another thing was discovered on the camera. Ludvig, the Norwegian guy, is caught in the middle of the night in the Salty Breeze kitchen going to the walk-in fridge. And Martin's like, what is a Norwegian doing in your kitchen at 3 a.m.? And Greg is like, oh, maybe a sleepwalking eater needed a friend? He's like, no, something is suspicious. And George is like, oh, he was very upset because his wife couldn't have a place to put her medicine, so I told him it's okay if he puts it in the fridge. And then Greg says, oh, I had a conversation with her and she doesn't believe in medicine. And Dr. Martin's like, that's another reason not to like them. And they're like, whoa, don't say that. They are the sweetest people. And Martin's like, he just doesn't buy it. He does not trust these people. So he immediately says, we need to get to the bottom of this. So he goes into the refrigerator, and there's no medicine in the fridge. There's just a thing of yogurt, Norwegian yogurt. And he opens it up, and there's a water sample in it. And he's like, what are they doing with the water sample in the fridge? And everybody's trying to defend him, Greg. First of all, George says it's a violation of privacy. Doesn't think they should be snooping. Martin says, it's your kitchen. We have the right to. Greg just wants to know what's in it. Turns out it has the water sample. George's defense says that he is a science teacher, and Martin still doesn't buy it. He's like, if that's truly what he is, and once again they're telling him that about why can't you trust people? Not everybody is bad. And he's like, why doesn't he want to change? And he's like, is that the motto of this town? Change? So he is not buying it whatsoever. He knows that something is going on. As they are having the discussion in the kitchen, we find out that he has got Sheriff Mark's test results back, and it's not looking good. So he immediately rushes to the sheriff's office, to the jail, and wouldn't you know it, Mark is gone. He's not in the jail cell. He's just vanished. Immediately, Louisa comes back, and we need to back up for a second, because Louisa went to the doctor's appointment that Martin set up for her. And she found out some very interesting news, because at the dance thing, she asks Martin if he had to pull too many favors, how did he get her in so fast? And he's like, I didn't. It was no big deal. Like that. Well, she thanked him for getting her into the specialist. She goes to the specialist, she's talking to the doctor, and it sounds like that things might not be as easy for her as it seemed, that her fertile window is closing quickly and it's not normal for her age, that it's going to be a concern if she wants to have a child, pretty much. And then she starts talking, the doctor starts talking to her about, so you got referred to me by Dr. Best? And she's like, yes. And Louisa's like, yes, why? Is that out of the ordinary? And the doctor's like, no, just as abruptly as he's left Boston, I'm just a little surprised by that. And then asks her where she's from, and she says Port Wynne, and she says, wait a second, Port Wynne? Is that, oh yes, Port Wynne, where he summered as a child. And she's like, how do you know all this? And the doctor, Montgomery, is like, because I'm his ex. We used to date. And Louisa, you know the look on Louisa's face. She's shocked, and she's like, you used to date? And she's like, yes. And she's like, when did you meet him? In med school, of course. So clearly there is a little bit of jealousy going on in Louisa, I think. I think she's shocked that he had an ex. And I'm a little shocked he had an ex too, because of back to episode 1, when we first see him talking to Louisa in the grocery store by themselves, he asks her if you ever know who the true love is. He doesn't believe in love. He doesn't believe finding the true one. So it made me think that he's never been in a relationship before, but clearly I was wrong, because he turns out he has an ex. That he was dating this woman back in med school, apparently. And she even asks him, Dr. Montgomery even asks Louisa if he's single. And Louisa just kind of got uncomfortable, and she's like, okay, I think it's time for me to go, pretty much. So that was a lot. So back to, now that we know that, let's back to the whole looking for Mark. Louisa immediately goes back to the jail, is looking for Mark as well, is surprised she's running into Martin, and Martin tells her that he needs to see Mark immediately. Everything is not okay. Mark's blood alcohol levels is way too high, that he should be in a hospital right now. But he can't find him. So immediately they go searching, because Louisa tries to call his phone. He ain't picking up because his phone is in the jail cell. So they're on a mission to find Mark, the long lost, drunk and depressed sheriff is on the loose in Port Wynne. And thankfully it wasn't hard to find him, because Martin asks Louisa if she knows of a special park place he would go to, and she's like, as a matter of fact, I do. And it turns out he was in a tree house. So immediately Martin has to climb up the tree house to talk to Mark, because Mark is just not okay. He's eating cereal, he's just upset, and he's not happy to see the both of them. He's like, the two people that I don't want to see right now, and I have to. So Martin ends up climbing the ladder and starts talking to Mark and tells him that he is not drunk, that he has auto brewery syndrome. And immediately Mark's like, nope, that is not the password. You cannot come in. And Martin's like, no, you have auto brewery syndrome. You're not drunk. He's like, so I'm not an alcoholic? And Dr. Best Martin's like, no, you're not. What happened was, because he's eaten so much, the sugars and everything, and him being on antibiotics and having where he got impaled, everything is causing basically his stomach to be a brewery, making and producing alcohol, making it seem like he's drunk, but he's not, and it's just a condition he has. and it can be fixed. So that was a relief, and immediately the treehouse starts cracking because Mark is like, "See, Louisa, I'm not a drunk," and Louisa's like, "Yay!" And then she's like, "Can you immediately come down, because the treehouse is getting ready to fall, pretty almost, it seemed like, because it was making loud noises." So they immediately get down, and as they're getting down, Mark realizes that Louisa and Martin care for him, and then he's like, "You must really care for me if you want to look for me. You saved me." And they're like, "Yeah." And he looks at Martin and he says, "You even climbed up a treehouse for me." And he's like, "Yes, I did, and I was not really thrilled about it either." So finally Mark says, "I love you guys. As friends, though. Just friends." So maybe their friendship can become a thing again between the three of them, because maybe all of that can be behind them now that Mark realizes that they really do care for him as a friend. And as they're having that heartfelt conversation, we see Martin catches a drone up in the sky and realizes that Ludwig is the one flying it. And then what Mark says kind of cracks me up because of his goofy self. He says, they said, "There's a drone." He's like, "Somebody needs to call the police." "Oh wait, I am the police." I'm like shaking my head. I was like, that was a little too much over the top. I don't know about that, but at this point, that's his personality, I guess. So now we know who's flying the drones, but why are they flying the drones is the question. So immediately after seeing that, Martin's back in his office, and he's thanking Elaine for once doing something that she's not supposed to do, or was supposed to do, but she didn't do it. He said, "Thank you, Elaine, for not taking out the trash after I asked you to," because the drone was in the trash. And he immediately asks Al if he can pull the video footage from the drone that he wants to see what's on it. Then Peter comes back in, and Peter Kronk comes in with the dog and is like, "Hey, Dr. Best, just wanted to let you know that I ordered a water and food bowl with Copernicus names on it, so that it'll be coming in the mail." And I thought that was super sweet. And even Dr. Best is like, "Well, that'll be good." And then he asks him, "Peter, about what you said at the school, you can't be calling me your dad. That's not the truth." And Peter's like, "But why?" And Dr. Best is like, "Well, why would you even want me as a father?" And he's like, "Well, because you're mean and you're nice and I can trust you. You make me feel comfortable." And I just thought that was super cute. And Dr. Best is like, "You really like that about me?" And Peter's like, "Yeah." And he says, "You're the only one that thinks I should not change my personality." And Peter's like, "Why would you change? You're perfect the way you are. I love you for who you are." And I thought that was just so cute and sweet that he was able to have that conversation with Peter, and like the reaction, it was just super sweet. So I loved that. And then we learned that Al could get the footage, and he gets the footage off the drone, and we realize that they are taking surveys of the harbor pretty much, and is even going underwater. And everybody's confused. Why would they be doing that? Even Martin's like, "Why would they do that? We're not known for our coral reefs." And so he immediately says something's not up. So he has Al Google the name of the place, the company, and he says it turns out that they are a seafood can company based out of Norway. And he said, "I bet, how much you want to bet that our Norwegian friend is the person on top of this?" And sure enough, her picture pops up, and turns out that she's getting ready to take over the company. And he's like, "I knew there was something off about these." And even Elaine's like, "Wait, what's going on?" And he says, "I don't know, to be determined, but it's not good, whatever it is." And then what Elaine says cracks me up. She says, "This is my sister city. I've already lost one sister. This is traumatizing. I can't take this." I just thought that was so funny, bringing back up the sister that she absorbed in episode 3 way back when. And so Dr. Best immediately storms to the Salty Breeze, and he walks in, and he wants to know where Glendon and the Norwegians are. And immediately Geneva's like, "You're not trying to start trouble, I hope." And even Aunt Sarah's like, "Leave these poor nice people alone, Martin. You've done enough." And he's like, "Well, these nice people are not who they seem they are." And everybody's like, even Greg and George is like, give it a rest, Martin. You've stood your point. You don't like them, but enough's enough. So Glendon comes in, and he's with the Norwegians, and immediately Martin's like, so, what have you been talking about? Tell the people what you've been hiding, because what you're up to no good. And so basically they come clean. She says that they want to sign a business deal where they can put a salmon farm in their bog to make pretty much harvest, and everybody is not happy about that, and Glendon was in on it the whole entire time, and they said, well, we're not agreeing to this until we see more, and Glendon's like, too late, Geneva already signed. So it turns out Glendon tricked Geneva into signing, and she didn't read the fine print, so the contract's a contract. And everybody is upset, especially Aunt Sarah was even more upset when Martin told her that Ludwig is the one that hit her in the back of the head with the drone. And everybody is so upset. George is tearing down all of the Norwegian flag decorations in the Salty Breeze because they've been betrayed pretty much. And that was that. Because we are on a cliffhanger now. We will not get to see what happens next until next week. The finale is a continuation of this episode. So the question is, will they get to keep their beautiful Port Wind the way it is? Or has Glendon got them into this big business deal where they're going to start losing the scenery of their town? To be continued. And I'm not going to lie, I was very sad that we have to have a continuation, a big cliffhanger, because I wanted to know what was going to happen. But at the same time, I'm thankful that we're getting to see another episode where it's the cliffhanger, rather than putting a cliffhanger as the first episode of another season. I cannot stand whenever you have the big cliffhanger and have to wait another year or whatever before you can see the next season. So I'm curious to see what happens. I was never a fan of Glendon. I did not like him from the start. I just could not stand him. And he's proven my point why I cannot stand him. He's basically backstabbed the town pretty much. And I'm not happy about that. And the fact that Martin was on to this the whole entire time does not surprise me. I just wish people would have listened to him more. So yeah, that is my thoughts on Best Medicine episode 12. And I think it's time for me to maybe share my thoughts of what I liked in this episode. And things that I wish I would have seen. So first of all, like I touched on at the beginning, I'm really loving Elaine's character. I'm beginning to love her more and more. She was annoying at the beginning of the season with the whole social media stuff, but as we got to know her and as she's figuring out kind of what she wants to do, I'm loving her character even more, and it was just so funny to see her doing accents and stuff. And even seeing her and Al's relationship looks like they're still thriving, doing well, is good to see. I loved that we got to see more of Greg and George again. Just poor Greg about his whole poop scare, but at least he's okay and safe and well, and they're just funny characters in general. I love that. And Peter Cronk and Dr. Bess Martin's relationship, I just love that they have a friendship, he has a father figure. Martin is his father figure, I think. And I love to see that. They get one another, and it's just super sweet to see. I was hoping that maybe Martin and Louisa could talk more, and Martin would be able to share his thoughts, how he really feels for Louisa. But unfortunately, he just didn't have the words to say. He changed the subject, and I'm a little shocked that he has an ex, and that is the specialist he sent Louisa to, and now she knows about it, and I'm curious to see how that is brought up, or if it even is, and will this ex come to Port Wind now because of in next week's episode, the little preview that they show you at the end of the show shows her showing up at his doorstep, so that'll be interesting. the whole Sheriff Mark thing, I'm glad that it was just a medical condition that could be treated, that he's okay, and it sounds like maybe his relationship as friends has been restored with both Louisa and Martin. Time will tell, but for the most part, he was still that goofy character that we're just going to have to be used to at this point. I'm used to his interesting character, I'll say. And yeah, the Glendon thing, not surprised whatsoever. I've never was a fan of Glendon, and I figured if it was up to Glendon to do something, he would be the one that was up to no good, pretty much. And then Aunt Sarah, I've always loved her character. She always cracks me up. I love her character. I love Annie Potts in general. So yeah, so that's what I think about this week's episode. Curious to see what unfolds next week. I'm curious to see about the whole ex-girlfriend being brought up, and seeing if they can get out of this contract that Geneva signed not knowing she signed. And yeah, to be determined, I guess. But that are my thoughts about this episode. Overall, I enjoyed this episode, and I can't wait to see what happens next week. Even though it's the finale, it's going to be bittersweet, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked seeing this video, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to turn that notification bell on if you want to get notified every time I upload so you don't miss a video like this. And this is the part of the video now where if you have not seen Doc Martin, you may want to tune off, because this is the part where we dive into the parallels of the Doc Martin world. So if you've not seen Doc Martin, you may want to skip this part, because there are spoilers to this show as well. But if you are a Doc Martin fan like myself, and you're curious what I found to be parallels, come on, let's talk about it. So, if you made it to this part of the video, you are a Doc Martin fan like myself. And this week, there were a lot of things that I kind of picked up on that reminded me of Doc Martin. Right off the bat, the whole Sheriff Mark thing, the whole seems drunk all the time, I immediately thought about Series 2, Episode 4. And the reason I know the episode right off the top of my head is I literally just watched this episode yesterday. It's the episode where Caroline appears to be drunk all the time, and she's driving under the influence, and everybody is convinced that she's drinking herself to death, but it turns out that she has a diabetic issue because she smelled of varnish, and all she needed was some insulin. And so that's what I immediately cut to, but it turns out what they really were referring to in Doc Martin was the Graham, Mel's husband's case, when he appeared to be drunk all the time. And Mel even thought he was drinking, but he wasn't, and it turned out he had auto brewery syndrome. And he ends up crashing Louisa's new car at the event of the boat competition. So there went Louisa's car. She didn't end up getting it in Doc Martin. But that is the same thing. Instead of Graham, Mel's husband, and having auto brewery syndrome, Sheriff Mark Milo in Best Medicine has the condition. And we find that out later on in the episode as it develops. Also, what made me think right away of something to Doc Martin was the episode remember when Mrs. Tishel finds out that Dr. Elliam is leaving Port Wynne for the first time. I think this was probably Series 3 or 4. It was Louisa had just had the baby, and Martin was already planning on leaving, going back to London. And Mrs. Tishel found out and made Martin a sweater that had the word Martin across it. Martin was not too thrilled about that. He was a little traumatized about Mrs. Tishel, but that reminded me immediately when Louisa comes into Dr. Best's office and Best Medicine and says, hey, Geneva has a theme for this event. she wants everyone to wear sweaters, and she hands Martin the sweater that had reindeer on it. So that's what immediately made me think of that. And like Martin Elliam and Doc Martin, who did not wear the sweater, Dr. Best did not wear his sweater as well to the event. Louisa meeting Dr. Best's ex, Dr. Montgomery, immediately took me to Louisa on Doc Martin meeting Martin Elliam's ex-girlfriend, Edith Montgomery. I don't think they said the first name of Dr. Montgomery's name in Best Medicine yet, so to be determined if it is the same. Now, unlike on Doc Martin on Best Medicine, Dr. Best Martin refers Louisa to her because she's wanting to get pregnant, whereas on Doc Martin, Louisa Glassman is already pregnant with James Henry, which we don't know at the time that that's what his name's going to be. And so she's going there, and Martin Elliam doesn't realize she's going to seeing Edith, his ex, until it is brought about and she shows up to his house. So a lot is going on there. In Best Medicine, we haven't seen them talk yet, but in Doc Martin, Edith was trying to get Martin Elliam back, it seemed like. She wanted to be together with him again. So, time will tell in Best Medicine. Another thing that I immediately realized that and put parallels to, in Best Medicine, the board wants Martin Best, Dr. Best, to be the councilman in the place of Agnes Kloof, who had died flying off the cliff, to sign the deal for the sister city. Where in Doc Martin, they signed Martin Elliam up to be part of the school board to appoint Louisa or whoever to be the new head mistress of the school, the principal, pretty much. And, like in Doc Martin, Martin Elliam was not a fan of that, did not want to be a part of that. Same thing in Best Medicine. Martin Best was like, why are you choosing me? Now, in Doc Martin, I think this whole council thing was like a permanent thing, because I feel like Martin Elliam was on that board throughout the series, if I remember exactly. I could be wrong on that, but in Best Medicine, this is a temporary thing for Martin Best. And then lastly, another thing that I put parallels to is in Doc Martin, do you remember the episode where the janitor at the school becomes delusional because he has carbon monoxide poisoning, and he's on top of the school shed and he's terrified to come down, he's hallucinating, and so Martin Elliam, Doc Martin had to climb the ladder to kind of coax him down, and there was a whole scene with Pinhale and everything, but that's not the part of it. But that's when I laugh at that episode pretty much. In Best Medicine, when Sheriff Mark is in the treehouse and he's eating his emotions, and he's not okay because he thinks he's drunk, Martin Best, Dr. Best, ends up climbing the ladder to go talk to Mark to tell him he knows what's wrong with him. And that whole scene reminded me of that. Both happy endings, they all come down safely, but that reminded me of that. And then the whole thing between Greg and Martin, Greg thinking that about he pooped out a little kid, and Martin asks him if it talks back to him, that kind of brought back the whole thing when Martin Elliam went to see Stewart, the park ranger, and he asks him if Anthony the squirrel talks back. And so, is it a talking squirrel? Does it talk back? That's what that reminded me of, in a way. But yeah, those are the parallels of what I thought about when watching this episode, and what I thought kind of brought back little things from Doc Martin. unlike last week I thought of a few things, but it wasn't obvious, and I don't know if necessarily those would be thought about. I just had to dig really deep into thinking about what would be in relation to the show's parallels. And so, this week it was very easy for me to pick out things. And, I'm curious about next week's episode because, like I said, looks like Dr. Montgomery comes to Port Wynne to see Martin Best. We will see about that, and like I said in the other half of the video, I'm a little sad that this was a cliffhanger that we have to wait to see what happens next week, but in a way I'm grateful because it is the finale. Like, we get to see another episode and maybe it'll wrap up and we don't have to wait for season 2 to come out to see what happens, because I want to know what happens. And another thing, when we went at the beginning of the show, when Elaine was doing accents, she does a British accent. Was that a tip of the hat to Doc Martin because it is a British TV series? I think it might have been, and I really like that. And I even think whenever Aunt Sarah is in the examination room where she got hit with the drone, Elaine's talking in the accent, and I'm pretty sure she was doing a British accent. And she does the British accent. And Aunt Sarah says, "Yeah, I have no clue what she said. All I know is I got hit in the back of the head with a drone." That made me laugh because in Doc Martin, they're all the time picking at us Americans. Even when Sangoria Weaver, I think that's how you say her name, when she was on there, they had a little thing where they picked at us Americans. So I just thought that was funny. But yeah, that is my thoughts as a Doc Martin fan. Overall, I enjoyed this episode, and I love that we got to see the more of the characters' relationships continue to grow and learn a little bit about people, the characters. And I'm looking forward to next week's episode. Gonna be sad that this is the finale next week, but yeah, it's been fun watching. And I've enjoyed making this series on my channel, reacting each and every week. And I can't wait for next week and to share with you guys my thoughts. But that is going to conclude our video for the day. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed, and please leave a like if you'd like. Subscribe if you're interested in seeing more. Comment if you have thoughts. Maybe there's some things that I left out, or if you have... What did you think about the episode? I'm curious. And turn that notification bell on, as always, if you are curious when I upload next, and you won't miss a single upload. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next week for part 2. Take care.